Budget. General fund. Sorry. General fund, you're right.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the Council. Tonight is the 6th workshop, City Council workshop for the budget. Tonight we'll be once again focusing on the general fund, the city's principal operating fund. And on June 1st, we'll be bringing forward to the Council the 7-year capital improvement program, along with the budget for all other funds of the city. As I mentioned, tonight's the 6th workshop, and we've had a series of standalone meetings with departments. We've also had several meetings with the Budget Standing Committee as well. I also wanted to point out that tonight's looking at the 2015-16 budget, but for the 2014-15 year, which is the current year that we're in, as the books are closed, as the year closes out, in the summer, as we're booking accruals back to the fiscal year, we'll bring an item back to the Council probably in September to have a review of the fund balance policy for the general fund. That's actually built into the policy that the Council approved in July to annually review the fund balance policy directives set for the general fund. And so that will be coming forward in the summer. So 2 weeks ago from today, we had a budget gap of $210,000, and we've been able to close that. So right now the projected surplus is $1,600. This graph just shows that the Council has maintained a balanced budget for a number of years, and once again, the budget is balanced for this year as well. Just kind of a review of a summary of the expenditures at the department level. And then getting into kind of the explanation for the increases and decreases. But just to recap, just to remind everyone that the general fund expenditures this year increased $867,000. But that does include $162,000 of one-time costs. It also includes a $288,000 increase in retirement costs. And comparing it to where we were, the expenditures were projected to be $13.37 million 2 weeks ago, and now they're projected to be $13.16 million. So on the next 2 slides is a list of the expenditure reductions that have been built into the current projected preliminary budget. And top of the list is the pre-funding of the capital replacement reserves with the 14-15 budget surplus. That's $125,000. That was built into the 15-16 budget based upon the policy directive of the Council. But with the budget surplus in the current year, 2014, which is projected to be $512,000, if we were to prepay that using the surplus in the current year, we could take it out of, and I believe that was the directive from the Council 2 weeks ago, or at least an item to consider. And so we've incorporated that, and we've removed that from the current budget. We've also incorporated savings associated with the refinancing of the 2006 certificates of participation and savings associated with prepaying PERS. We've also been able to incorporate savings associated with bringing certain contractual services in-house. In addition, we've incorporated other savings like reductions to leased equipment expenses and also printing services associated with the annual budget document and the annual financial statements. Also, police was able to identify savings of $6,500. There was a placeholder in the 15-16 budget for contractual services in the technology section of their budget. And as they actually firmed up those numbers, they realized they were able to realize savings. And then community development was able to reduce contractual services by $20,000. And then we were able to reduce we've incorporated a number of personnel-related items in this in the 15-16 budget. One of those relates to the minimum wage increase that goes into effect on January 1st. And we were proposing to increase the full spectrum of hourly employees up $1 per hour. But with the scaled-back approach, just really focusing on those that are directly affected by the minimum wage increase, instead of doing the full spectrum of hourly employees, it relates to savings of about $8,900. So that kind of recaps pretty much how we got to where we are now, which is with a balanced budget, and that really was without affecting service levels. So we're able to maintain the same level of service that we have in years past with an increase of $867,000 in expenditures, and yet still maintaining a balanced budget. So at this point, I'll turn it over to you for questions.
Could you explain what was reduced in the community development, $20,000? What did we give up?
You want to talk about that?
Yes, we had originally budgeted to have a consultant prepare a new zoning map for the city after the general plan was done. We're going to have to do about 7 different land use adjustments to match the new general plan. We're going to have to rezone this site. So when we were going to be done with all of that, we were going to need a new zoning map. We now think we're not going to be done as soon as we thought, because we're going to do it, and so we don't want to redo that map every time we do the zoning amendment for the individual property. We'll wait till the end, and we could probably push that out a year easily without really affecting services to anybody.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Jason, a couple questions. So on page 7, I just want to make sure, because you show this to the community too, is that these are expenditure reductions, so these are really negative numbers, correct?
Right.
So these, all of these are negative numbers. So the pre-funding of the capital reserves, a little bit confusing when you look at this and you say, I know what the principle is because we talked about it in the ad hoc, but just the way it's represented is, because the other ones, these are savings. When you get to the next page, it actually says reduction. Talk a little bit about the $125,000, because there's a couple things in play. There's a potential opportunity in 14-15 to do something with that surplus in 14-15 before we get to the year's end. There's this issue, which is, it might be confusing whether we're taking it out or putting it in here to use the surplus from a previous year, moving it forward, because really what we are doing here is we're funding it from a previous year amount, so it's not really a reduction, it's kind of a transfer, right?
Yeah, we had in the existing department's budget in 15-16, 2 weeks ago, we had a $125,000 charge built into each department's budget. So an amount was allocated to each department. And so what we've done here is we've taken it out of their budget. So each department's budget in total, citywide, has been reduced by $125,000. And the concept there is we've removed the charge that would have taken place in 2015-16, and we're going to make that payment, but we're going to make it in 2014-15. We can wait until the summer after the books have closed, and we know exactly how much of a budget surplus we have. So we projected it to be $512,000, and if that ends up being the case, then we would actually recommend not just the $125,000, but actually the entire $500,000 amount going towards vehicles and equipment and police capital needs.
Okay, so not sure I totally support that, but I would say that for the 125, again, the thing I just want to make sure I'm clear on the math for myself. So 125 out of 500,000 for this year, we're saying, hey, look, let's earmark it towards pre-funding, but not in the 14-15. So we're not doing any pre-funding in 14-15 at all.
We would actually ask you well, we actually have appropriation authority in 14-15, but we could ask for approval to make that entry in the 14-15 year.
Isn't the appropriation only for like 25 or 30,000? I mean, we only approved a very small amount for the capital equipment, the garage fund from last year. That was one of our ways of trying to bridge the shortfall, the current year that we're in, correct?
Right.
So you
There's 3 pieces in that 125. So there's 3 actual transfers that were allocated to go to 3 different internal service funds that were set up last year. The garage fund is one of them, and then there's 2 other internal service funds as well.
Right.
But they were significantly decremented when we closed the budget out last year, right?
They weren't in last year's budget. This
Yeah.
is the first time
Well,
we've.
0 would be significant.
Yes.
Yeah, so, I'm not clear on the math. So 14, 15, we're not, the year that we incur the surplus, we're not going to try and do anything for 14, 15 for the garage fund.
We would recommend that you do. So in September, since moving money to the vehicle fund doesn't require cutting a physical check because we hold the money, it's just moving it from one account internally to another account, we can do that with a journal entry. So we can post it back to June 30. So after, as the books are closed out and we're booking accruals and we know exactly how much the surplus is, we can actually record an entry to actually record the expense in the 14-15 year.
Yeah, I guess for the rest of council, I'm really supportive of, because we had a surplus this year, of helping expenses this year. I also know that we're trying to use some of the surplus to offset the heavy PERS pay up. I don't want to go crazy and overfund fairly quickly to get up to the $1.3 million in total for the garage fund, because I think the garage fund, and I've said it, it's getting old, but it's open for a lot of abuse. And I like being, as a council member, I like the fact that you have to, it slowly gets funded back. So you always have to have us go through a process like we're doing to say we really want to make the move. And then you have to come back and ask for an appropriation. So it's kind of a double protection that, and I'm afraid if we fund this thing at 100% and make up for 10 years of not doing the right thing there, then it's a lot easier to get equipment and stuff and go through this process a lot faster. And I just don't think that we're completely out of the focus on things, not people. And so I'm not super supportive of just going all in and trying to get those funds just totally budgeted and appropriated up to the full amounts. And again, probably a little bit of the misunderstanding I have is in the current year, even if you're saying, hey, you're backdating 125, well then if you're backdating it, you're not giving a credit in the current year to 125. You got to pick one of the years. You either got to go into the 15-16 or you got to backdate it into 14-15. And so one more time, the question is, which way are we going?
Presentation-wise, I was planning on showing that as an expense in 14-15 and not as an expense in 15-16. Because if you show it as an expense in 15-16, you won't have a balanced budget. Your expenditures will exceed your revenues.
So in theory, 15-16, we're going with nothing again as a
Yes.
start point. We're going to take it into this year, and because we're going nothing, you're not going to tax the departments for their 125.
Right.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And when we move money to the vehicle fund and to the parks fund and to the police capital internal service fund, it's not giving them appropriation authority. That would come at a later date. So it's just moving money there as a reserve to sit in the fund until you give us authority to spend it.
Thank you.
But I think the point is that Mayor Pro Tem's making, though, the moving it, the journal voucher into it is really an appropriation. I mean, that's, I think, the point, right? And
Yes.
And again, I think that this year versus next year, I think is really that kind of conundrum. So, I understand the point, Troy, but yeah, it's kind of a quandary, because basically we're zeroing it for 15-16.
Yeah,
But really the policy is we need to fund it 15-16.
correct.
So,
But we still will have a surplus. If we truly close out at 512,000 surplus, we'll still have a surplus of 387,000 after we put the 125. And that's when we come back and make a decision on what do we do with that.
Exactly.
And that's where we can come back and say, now we want to fund 15-16.
Yeah, and I'm with you. And I will look forward to that discussion.
Oh, absolutely.
Different
But we don't have to do
fun
that now.
time.
That's-
No,
we're
yeah.
just doing this.
Yeah, I just want to make sure where we're bookkeeping it here. I get it.
anyone else? Any other questions? Isn't there supposed to be a picture of Troy at the end of these?
Now, actually, $20 will get you a long ways here in the city, actually, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
With a pizza, I think.
Or some outhouse. or-
We will adjourn to the regular meeting. Thank you.